It was early morning in Atlanta, and the sound of rain tapping against the window was the first thing Tanya heard before her alarm went off. She sighed, rubbed her tired eyes, and sat up slowly. Another day, another long shift ahead. The air smelled faintly of coffee from the small kitchen, and the soft hum of her old refrigerator filled the silence of their small two-bedroom apartment. Her daughter, Kayla, was still asleep, her small body curled up beneath a faded cartoon blanket. Her son Jordan was already awake, trying to tie his shoelaces with sleepy eyes. Tanya smiled softly at him. "You're up early," she said, her voice gentle but weary. "I didn't want to be late again," Jordan mumbled, his fingers fumbling with the knot. Tanya crouched beside him and tied it for him, neat and quick like she'd done 1,000 times before. "You're doing great," she said with a tired smile. "One day you'll be faster than me." He grinned. "You always say that." "I mean it every time," she said, kissing his forehead. The clock ticked closer to 7. She quickly got dressed in her waitress uniform, the same one she'd worn for 2 years, and packed the kids' lunches. Money was tight. It always was. The fridge was mostly empty except for a carton of milk, a few eggs, and half a loaf of bread. She spread peanut butter thinly across 2 slices, trying to make it last another week. When they stepped outside, the rain had picked up, turning the streets into a blur of silver puddles. Tanya held one umbrella, her arms stretched to keep both kids dry. The bus stop was crowded and the cold air bit at their faces. She worked at a small diner downtown, the kind of place where the coffee was always hot but the pay was always short. The regulars knew her by name, mostly truck drivers, construction workers, and office employees who liked her smile. She smiled even when she didn't feel like it. It was her armor, the one thing that helped her get through the day. "Morning, Tanya," her boss called as she clocked in. "Full house today. Table 3 already asking for you." "Yes, sir," she replied, tying her apron tighter. She moved between tables with practiced ease, refilling cups, taking orders, making small talk. Her feet ached by noon, but she didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. Around lunchtime, her phone buzzed. It was a reminder. Pick up kids at 3 darn. She had exactly 1 hour to finish her shift, settle her tips, and catch the bus. She was already calculating in her head. Bus fare, rent, groceries, electricity, trying to make the math stretch further than it could go. At 2:45, she rushed out still wearing her work shoes, raincoat thrown over her shoulders. The clouds had turned darker, heavy with another storm. She caught the bus just in time, her hand shaking as she held the metal pole. Outside, raindrops raced down the windows, blurring the city into streaks of gray. Halfway home, the bus slowed down near an intersection. That's when Tanya saw him. An old man stood at the corner of the street holding a soaked paper map in his trembling hands. He wore a long beige coat that looked expensive once, but now it hung limp and wet. His gray hair was plastered to his forehead, and his glasses were crooked. He turned slowly in circles as if trying to find something that wasn't there. Tanya's first thought was to ignore it. She was already late. But something in her chest tightened. The man looked lost, confused, and alone. When the bus stopped at the red light, she stared out the window, debating with herself. The driver's voice echoed, "Next stop, Oakwood Avenue." That was her stop. She hesitated for just a moment before calling to her kids. "Come on, we're getting off here." "Mom, this isn't our stop," Jordan said. "I know, baby. Just trust me." They stepped off the bus into the rain. The cold hit hard, soaking through her thin coat. She hurried toward the old man, holding the umbrella over both of them. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked gently. He looked up, blinking through the rain. I can't seem to find my way back. I was walking to the park, but I think I made a wrong turn. Do you have anyone with you? Family? A phone, maybe?" He patted his pockets helplessly. "I left it at home. I thought I'd only be gone a few minutes." "Where do you live?" she asked. He squinted, trying to remember. "It's called Silver Pines. A residence near Briarwood, I think." Tanya nodded. She knew that place, and a senior living community about 15 minutes away by car. "It's pretty far to walk in this weather," she said softly. "Come on. I'll give you a ride." "Oh no, I couldn't trouble you," he protested weakly. "It's no trouble," Tanya said firmly. "You'll catch a cold out here." Her kids looked at her, water dripping from their sleeves. They didn't say anything. They knew their mom. She always helped. Always. She led the old man to her old car parked nearby. a faded blue sedan with a missing hubcap and a stubborn engine. The seats were worn and the heater barely worked, but it was better than standing in the rain. Once they were inside, Tanya handed him a napkin from the glove compartment to dry his face. "We'll get you warm soon, okay?" He smiled faintly. "You're very kind, miss. Most people just walk by." She shrugged. "Maybe they didn't see you." "Oh, they saw me," he said softly, looking out the window. "They just didn't want to stop." The words made her chest tighten again. She started the car, the wipers squeaking as they cleared the rain from the windshield. The drive was slow, the road slick and shiny. The old man sat quietly, his hands resting on his lap. "So," Tanya said, trying to make conversation, "do you have family around here?" "Not anymore," he replied after a pause. "My wife passed years ago. My son, he moved overseas. We lost touch." "I'm sorry to hear that," she said gently. He looked at her in the rearview mirror. "And you? You have a lovely family." "Just me and my 2 kids," Tanya said, glancing at them in the back seat. "It's not easy, but we manage." The man nodded slowly. "You must be strong." "I try," she said with a small smile. "Life doesn't always go the way we plan, but you keep going, right?" He chuckled softly. "That's wisdom right there." When they reached Silver Pines, the security guard recognized the man immediately. "Mr. Whitmore, we've been looking everywhere for you." The guard rushed over, holding an umbrella. Tanya helped the man out of the car carefully, making sure he didn't slip. "Thank you, young lady," he said, holding her hand a little longer than necessary. "You didn't have to stop, but you did. I won't forget that." "It's okay," Tanya said, smiling. "Just glad you're safe." The guard took the man's arm and led him toward the building. Tanya waved before turning back to her kids. "All right," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "Let's get home before the rain gets worse." As they drove away, Jordan asked quietly, "Mom, who was that man?" "Just someone who needed a little help," she said. "Do you think he has anyone to take care of him?" Kayla asked. Tanya glanced in the mirror at their small faces. "Maybe. But even if he didn't, it's good that we were there." They nodded silently. The car filled with the soft sound of rain again. That night after dinner, Tanya sat by the window while her kids slept. She thought about the old man, his lost eyes, his soft voice, the way his hand trembled when he held the napkin. She wondered if he had really found anyone who cared for him, or if he was just another lonely soul in a big, busy world that didn't slow down for anyone. Her phone buzzed with a text from her boss. "Can you cover the morning shift tomorrow?" She stared at it for a moment, then typed back, "Yes." She looked around their small apartment, the cracked wall paint, the second-hand furniture, the dishes piled in the sink. It wasn't much, but it was home. She didn't know it yet. But that small decision to stop in the rain, that one act of kindness would soon change everything about her life. For now, though, she just smiled to herself, whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, and turned off the light. The rain outside softened to a drizzle, almost like the world was finally taking a breath. The next few days went by like they always did. Tanya woke up early, packed the kids' lunches, and ran from work to home like the clock was chasing her. The memory of the old man she'd helped stayed with her, though. Sometimes when she passed the same street corner, she glanced around, half expecting to see him again, standing with that lost look on his face. But he wasn't there. Life didn't slow down. Her job at the diner was busier than ever. Mornings were filled with the smell of bacon, coffee, and toast, and the hum of voices from regular customers. She smiled through the long hours, though her feet hurt and her back ached. The regulars liked her. Some left small tips, some left kind words. But no matter how much she worked, the money never seemed enough. One night, as she counted her tips at the counter, her co-worker, Denise, leaned over. "Girl, you're always working. You ever take a day off?" Tanya laughed softly. "Days off don't pay bills." Denise shook her head. "You need a break. You'll burn out." "I can't afford to burn out," Tanya said simply, stuffing her tips into a small envelope. Later that night, when she finally got home, both kids were asleep on the couch, a cartoon still playing softly on the TV. She smiled and turned it off. She covered them with a blanket and whispered, "Sweet dreams." It was moments like that, quiet, small, tender, that gave her strength. She didn't have much, but she had love, and that meant something. A week passed before she heard anything about the old man again. It happened at the diner on a Thursday afternoon. The rain was falling again, gentle this time, just enough to patter on the windows. Tanya was clearing a table when she noticed two men in dark suits walk in. They looked out of place among the truckers and regulars. One of them scanned the room before approaching the counter. "Excuse me," he said politely. "We're looking for a woman named Tanya Robinson." Tanya turned, startled. "That's me," she said cautiously. The man smiled. "I'm glad we found you. My name is Andrew. I work with Mr. Whitmore, Harold Whitmore. He asked us to give you this." He handed her a small white envelope. It had her name written neatly on it. Her hands hesitated before opening it. Inside was a simple handwritten note. "Dear Tanya, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to thank you once again for your kindness that rainy day. You probably don't realize how much it meant to me. I'd like to see you if you have time. I'd love to treat you and your children to lunch. Please call the number below when it's convenient for you. With gratitude, Harold Whitmore." She stared at the note for a long moment, unsure how to react. "Is this really from him?" she asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am," the man said with a respectful nod. "He talks about you often. Said you're one of the kindest people he's met in a long time." Tanya didn't know what to say. It wasn't every day an old man you helped suddenly sent people in suits to find you. I'll think about it," she said finally. The man smiled. "Please do. He's been eager to see you again." When they left, Denise hurried over. "What was that about, you getting secret letters now?" Tanya laughed nervously. "It's that old man I told you about, the one who got lost in the rain. He wants to meet again." "Well, that sounds sweet. Maybe he just wants to thank you." "Yeah, maybe," Tanya said, though she couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. She wasn't used to fancy people wanting to meet her. Her world was small: work, kids, and survival. That night, she showed the letter to her children. "Mom, are we going?" Jordan asked, his eyes wide. "I don't know yet," she said. "What if it's weird or too fancy?" Kayla grinned. "Maybe he just wants to say thank you. You helped him, remember?" Tanya smiled softly. "Yeah, maybe you're right." After a long pause, she decided to call the number. A kind voice answered and arranged lunch for Sunday at Silver Pines, the same place where she'd dropped him off. When Sunday came, Tanya made sure her kids were dressed nicely. Jordan wore his best button-up shirt, and Kayla had her hair tied with a little pink ribbon. Tanya herself wore a simple blue dress she hadn't worn in years. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and neat. The security guard at Silver Pines recognized her immediately and smiled. "Back again, I see. Mr. Whitmore's been waiting for you." Inside, the place looked even more beautiful than she remembered. Soft music, polished floors, and big windows that looked out onto a garden filled with flowers. When Harold saw them, his face lit up like sunshine. "Tanya," he said warmly, his voice full of life. "You came." He stood up slowly, leaning on his cane. Tanya hurried to help him, but he waved her off gently. "I'm all right, dear. Come, sit down. I ordered some tea." She smiled. "It's good to see you again. You're looking better." "Thanks to you," he said with a grin. "If you hadn't stopped that day, I don't know what would have happened." "This is Jordan and Kayla," she said, introducing her children. Harold's eyes softened. "Beautiful children. You must be proud." "I am," Tanya said, her voice quiet but full of love. They sat together in the dining room, talking and laughing. The children liked him instantly. He told them funny stories about his younger days, about how he once got lost in Paris, how he accidentally bought 40 loaves of bread in France because he didn't know the language. The kids laughed so hard they could barely breathe. After lunch, Harold grew quiet. He looked at Tanya for a long time as if studying her. "You remind me of my late wife," he said softly. She had the same kind eyes, the kind that see people, not things. Tanya didn't know what to say. She felt tears prick at her eyes, but she smiled instead. "She sounds like a wonderful woman." "She was," he said. "And so are you." She looked down, shy. Compliments like that always made her uncomfortable. She wasn't used to praise. As they were about to leave, Harold said, "May I ask you something?" "Of course." "What do you want most right now? If you could change one thing in your life, what would it be?" Tanya hesitated. "Honestly, I just want stability. I want to finish nursing school. I want my kids to have a better life than I did." Harold nodded slowly. "That's a good answer. You have a big heart, Tanya. Don't ever lose that." He gave her a gentle smile before adding, "I'd like to stay in touch if that's all right." "Of course," she said, "I'd like that too." As they left, Tanya noticed the staff whispering softly to each other. She caught a glimpse of one of the suited men from before, writing something down in a small notebook. She didn't think much of it then. On the way home, her children couldn't stop talking. "He was so funny, Mom," Kayla said, giggling. "And nice," Jordan added. "He said he used to fly airplanes. Can you believe that?" Tanya laughed. "Yeah, he's lived quite a life." That night, after the kids went to bed, she sat on the couch thinking about the day. There was something about Harold that felt different. He didn't act like other older men she'd met. He was humble, gentle, and genuinely curious about her life. The next week, he called her again. "Hello, Tanya." His voice came through the phone, warm and cheerful. "I was wondering if I might visit the diner one day. I'd like to see you at work." She laughed. "You really want to see me running around with coffee and plates?" "I do," he said. "It sounds more interesting than my routine here." A few days later, he showed up at the diner, neatly dressed in a gray suit, leaning on his cane. The customers turned to look as he walked in. He had an air of quiet dignity about him. Tanya was nervous at first, but soon she was laughing with him like an old friend. He ordered the house special and left a tip so large that she nearly dropped the checkbook. "Mr. Whitmore, that's too much," she said, trying to hand it back. He shook his head. "You earned it. Don't argue with an old man." She smiled and tucked it into her pocket. Over the next few weeks, he became a regular visitor. Sometimes he just sat in the corner booth, sipping coffee and reading the newspaper. Other times he brought little gifts for her kids, a new backpack for school, a book, a box of chocolates. Tanya always protested. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he'd reply. "But I want to." Little did she know, he was doing more than just visiting. He was quietly learning about her life, where she lived, how hard she worked, how she dreamed of finishing nursing school, but couldn't afford tuition. He didn't say much, but every time she spoke, he listened closely, like her words mattered more than anything else. He saw in her what he'd been missing in the world for a long time, kindness that asked for nothing in return. And though Tanya didn't know it yet, her small act of compassion had already started a chain of events that would soon change everything, in ways she could never have imagined. The months rolled by quietly. Tanya's life still revolved around the same cycle: work, home, kids, sleep, repeat. But something was different now. There was a lightness in her steps, a sense that someone out there genuinely cared about her. Mr. Whitmore had become like a quiet blessing in her life. He called once or twice a week just to ask how she was doing or to check on her kids. Sometimes when she was at the diner, he'd stop by for lunch, always sitting at the same corner table near the window. Her co-workers began to tease her about it. "Your friend's back again," Denise would whisper, smiling. "He must really like your coffee." Tanya would laugh it off, pretending not to notice how much she looked forward to seeing him. He wasn't just a customer anymore. He had become family in a strange, comforting way. One evening after her shift ended, she saw him waiting by the door with his driver. The driver held an umbrella as the rain came down in steady sheets. "You're going to catch a cold if you stand out here," Tanya said, surprised. "I wanted to see you before you went home," he said with a smile. "I have something for you." He handed her a small brown envelope. Tanya frowned. "What's this?" "Just open it when you get home," he said gently. "And don't worry, it's nothing bad." She thanked him and tucked it into her bag, unsure what to expect. When she finally got home, the kids were asleep, and the apartment was quiet except for the sound of rain outside. She sat on the couch, opened the envelope and pulled out a folded piece of paper, It was a letter written in his neat handwriting. Dear Tanya, I know life hasn't been easy for you. I can see the strength in your eyes every time we talk. You remind me of what kindness truly means, helping others with no expectation of reward. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe people cross paths for a reason. Please don't be alarmed, but I've made arrangements for something I think will help you. Tomorrow someone from my office will call you. They'll explain everything. Just know it's something good. You've earned it. Harold. Tanya read the letter 3 times, her heart racing. Someone from his office? What could that mean? She tried not to overthink it, but sleep didn't come easily that night. The next morning, while she was making breakfast, her phone rang. A polite woman introduced herself as Mr. Whitmore's assistant. Good morning, Ms. Robinson. Mr. Whitmore asked me to let you know he set up something for you. If you're available, we'd like you to come by his office this afternoon. Tanya hesitated. His office? Is this about the foundation or something? I can't say much over the phone, the woman replied warmly. But I promise it's good news. By afternoon, Tanya found herself standing in front of a tall glass building downtown. She felt out of place among the polished cars and people in suits. Her old blue sedan looked like it didn't belong there. She almost turned back twice before finally gathering the courage to go in. The receptionist greeted her kindly. You must be Ms. Robinson. Mr. Whitmore is expecting you. Tanya followed the woman through a quiet hallway into a large office with tall windows overlooking the city. It looked nothing like the old man's cozy room at Silver Pines. Behind a massive wooden desk sat Harold, but this time he looked different. His usual cardigan and gentle smile were replaced by a sharp gray suit, a silk tie, and an air of quiet authority. For a moment, Tanya froze. I didn't recognize you, she said softly. He laughed, motioning for her to sit. Most people don't. I like to keep things simple at the residence. It keeps me grounded. She sat across from him, still confused. So this is your office? Yes, he said, smiling. This is where I used to spend most of my time. I don't come here much anymore, but I wanted to bring you here personally. She looked around at the shelves lined with awards, photographs, and framed newspaper articles. One of them caught her eye. A headline that read, Whitmore Industries donates millions to local hospitals. Her eyes widened. You're that Whitmore? He nodded. Guilty as charged. Tanya's heart pounded. I didn't know. I mean, I had no idea you were. She trailed off, unsure how to finish. A rich old man? He said, chuckling softly. That's the beauty of it, my dear. You didn't treat me like one. You treated me like a person. That's rare these days. She didn't know what to say. She felt overwhelmed sitting in front of someone she'd seen on billboards or maybe on the news without realizing it. He leaned forward, his tone gentle. Tanya, the day you stopped to help me, you showed more kindness than most people do in a lifetime. I've met business partners worth billions who wouldn't have spared me a glance that day. You did. You gave me something I can't buy, humanity. She swallowed hard, her eyes stinging. I was just doing what anyone should do. He smiled sadly. You'd be surprised how many people don't. He reached for a folder on his desk and slid it toward her. I'd like to help you, Tanya. I know you're working hard, raising your children and trying to finish school. I want to make that a little easier. She opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside was a document titled Scholarship Sponsorship Agreement. It listed her name and the full cost of tuition for her nursing program. Completely covered. Her mouth fell open. I can't accept this, she said quickly, her voice trembling. Yes, you can, he said firmly. This isn't charity. It's gratitude. But it's too much. He shook his head. No, it's not enough. You changed my life that day. You reminded me of the kind of person I used to be before money and business got in the way. Let me do this, please. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. I don't know what to say. Just say you'll accept it, he said gently. And keep being who you are. She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much, he smiled warmly. You deserve it. Before she left, he said quietly, Oh, and one more thing. I'm not done yet. I have something else in mind, but that's for another day. Tanya drove home in a daze. She felt like she was floating. When she told her kids the news, they jumped up and down, hugging her tightly. Mom, that means you can finish school. You can be a nurse, Kayla shouted. Yes, baby, Tanya said, laughing and crying all at once. I can. The days that followed felt lighter. Tanya went to work with a new sense of hope. Her coworkers noticed the glow on her face. "You look different," Denise said one morning. "Something good happen?" Tanya smiled. "Yeah, you could say that." Every few days, she'd visit Harold at Silver Pines. Sometimes they'd sit in the garden watching the sunset while sipping tea. He'd ask about her kids, her studies, her dreams. She'd listen to his stories, about how he built his company from nothing, how he lost people he loved because of money, how he learned that success meant nothing without kindness. "You know," he said one afternoon, "I spent most of my life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. You're one of the few who didn't. That's why this means so much to me." "I didn't do anything special," Tanya said softly. "You did more than you think," he replied. "You saw me when no one else did." One evening after visiting him, Tanya stopped by the grocery store. For the first time in years, she didn't have to count every dollar in her wallet. She picked up fresh vegetables, a real roast for dinner, and even a small chocolate cake for the kids. As she drove home, she felt tears in her eyes again. Not of sadness, but relief. For the first time, the future didn't look so impossible. A week later, Harold called again. "Tanya," he said in his warm, steady voice, "I'd like you to come to an event next weekend. It's something important and I want you there." "What kind of event?" she asked. "You'll see," he said with a chuckle. "Just wear something nice. Bring the kids if you like." She had no idea what he was planning, but she trusted him. When the day came, she dressed carefully and arrived at a large hall filled with people in elegant clothes. There was a banner hanging above the stage that read Whitmore Robinson Foundation Launch. She froze, staring at the words, unsure if she was reading them right. Harold stood at the podium, smiling proudly as she walked in. "Ah, there she is," he said into the microphone. "Everyone, this is Tanya Robinson, the reason we're here today." The crowd turned to look at her, clapping warmly. She stood there, speechless, as Harold continued. "This foundation will provide education and support for single parents who are working hard to build a better future, just like Tanya did for me. Her kindness changed my life, and now I hope we can pass that kindness on to others." Tanya's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. When the applause died down, Harold looked at her with a smile that said everything: gratitude, admiration, and love for humanity. Tanya walked up to him, still trembling, and whispered, "You didn't have to do all this." He smiled. "Yes, I did." And in that moment, Tanya realized something profound, that kindness doesn't end where you give it. It spreads, multiplies, and finds its way back to you in ways you could never imagine. She had no idea what the future still held, but one thing was certain: her life would never be the same again. The night of the foundation event stayed in Tanya's mind for weeks. Every time she thought about it, she felt like she was living in a dream she didn't want to wake up from. Her name, written next to his on that banner, still didn't feel real. People she'd never met before had come up to shake her hand and thank her for inspiring them. It was strange, overwhelming, and beautiful all at once. The next morning, she woke up to dozens of messages from people she hadn't heard from in years. Old co-workers, neighbors, even a few teachers from her nursing school had seen her picture in the newspaper. The headline read, "Local single mother inspires billionaire to launch foundation for struggling parents." She smiled as she read the story aloud at breakfast. The kids listened with wide eyes, proud smiles spreading across their faces. Jordan grinned. "Mom, you're famous." Tanya laughed. "Hardly. I just helped someone find their way home," Kayla said softly. "And now he's helping us." Tanya paused for a moment and nodded. "Yeah, baby. He really is." Over the next few weeks, Tanya's life began to change in small but meaningful ways. The foundation covered her full tuition, and she finally went back to school to finish her nursing degree. For the first time in years, she didn't have to choose between paying rent and buying books. She could breathe. Harold called often to check in on her progress. "How are classes going?" he'd ask. She would smile, holding her phone close. "Harder than I remember, but I'm doing it." "You'll do more than just finish," he'd say. "You'll shine. You always do." Sometimes she would visit him at Silver Pines, bringing homemade cookies or photos of the kids. He always greeted her with a warm hug and the same gentle laugh that reminded her of her grandfather. They'd sit together for hours talking about life, hope, and the kind of world they wished existed. One afternoon, as she was leaving after a visit, Harold said something that stayed with her. You know, Tanya, money can build buildings, but kindness builds people. That's what lasts, she smiled. You've built both, he chuckled. Maybe. But you're the reason I remembered why I started. The foundation began to grow quickly. Within months, it was helping dozens of single parents across the city pay for school, childcare, and housing. Tanya became the face of the program, speaking at small events and sharing her story. Each time she spoke, people listened, not because she was famous, but because she was real. She told them about the rainy afternoon when she stopped her car for a stranger. She told them how one small act of kindness had changed everything. Every time she spoke, she could see tears in people's eyes. She realized something she'd never thought of before. Her pain, her struggle, all those hard nights, they had led to something good, something that mattered. Months passed and Tanya's confidence grew. She did well in her classes and started her clinical rotations at the hospital. Her kids were thriving too. Jordan joined the school basketball team, and Kayla started taking piano lessons through a scholarship offered by the foundation. Their home was still modest, but it felt brighter now. There was laughter where there used to be worry. One afternoon, Tanya stopped by Silver Pines to see Harold. It was a warm spring day, and the garden was full of blooming flowers. She found him sitting on a bench under a tree reading a book. "Hey there, stranger," she said, smiling. He looked up and smiled back. "Ah, my favorite nurse-to-be. Come, sit with me." She sat beside him and handed him a paper bag. "I brought your favorite, blueberry muffins." "You remembered," he said with delight. "Of course. You said they reminded you of your wife." He nodded softly, his eyes distant for a moment. "Yes, she used to bake them every Sunday. You have her kindness, you know." Tanya smiled gently. "You've said that before." "And I'll keep saying it," he replied. "The world needs more people like you." They sat quietly for a while, watching a group of children from a nearby daycare run across the garden. Their laughter filled the air. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't gotten lost that day?" Tanya asked suddenly. Harold chuckled. "All the time. I think about how close I came to giving up on people. And then you stopped. You changed that. I think God wanted me to meet you." She looked at him, touched. "And I think maybe he wanted me to meet you too." As the sun began to set, Harold seemed more tired than usual. He smiled, but his hands trembled slightly when he reached for his tea. Tanya noticed. "Are you feeling okay?" "Oh, just old bones acting up," he said lightly. "Don't you worry," but she did worry. She could see it in his face, the quiet fatigue, the way his breath came a little slower. She didn't say anything then, but something in her heart told her to cherish every moment. Weeks later, while she was in class, her phone buzzed. It was a call from the Silver Pine staff. Her heart skipped. "Hello?" "Ms. Robinson," the voice said gently. "Mr. Whitmore isn't feeling well. He's asked to see you." Tanya didn't think twice. She grabbed her things and rushed out of class. When she arrived, Harold was in his room, resting in bed, a soft blanket over his legs. His smile was faint, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "Tanya," he said weakly. "You came." "Of course I came," she said, sitting beside him. "You scared me," he chuckled softly. "Didn't mean to. I just wanted to see my friend." She held his hand. "You'll be okay. You just need rest." He looked at her, his eyes full of warmth. "You know, I've had a good life. But meeting you, that was the best part. You reminded me that love still exists in this world." Tanya's eyes filled with tears. "Don't talk like that. You're going to be fine." He smiled gently. "Maybe, but if I'm not, I want you to promise me something." "Anything," she whispered. "Promise me you'll keep the foundation alive. Promise me you'll keep helping others the way you helped me." She nodded through tears. "I promise," he squeezed her hand weakly. "Good, then I can rest easy." She sat with him until he drifted off to sleep. The room was quiet except for the sound of his breathing and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Tanya held his hand the whole time, praying silently that he'd get better. A few days later, she received the call she'd been dreading. Harold had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The news hit her like a wave. She sat down on the kitchen floor, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. Her children ran to her, hugging her tightly. "Mom, what happened?" Kayla asked softly. "He's gone, baby," Tanya said through tears. "Mr. Whitmore's gone." They all cried together that night. It felt like losing family. The next week, Tanya attended the memorial service. The room was filled with people, business partners, employees, community members, all paying their respects to the man who had quietly changed so many lives. But as she looked around, she realized that few of them had known him the way she did. Few had seen the simple, kind-hearted man behind the title and the money. During the service, one of Harold's lawyers approached her. "Ms. Robinson," he said kindly, "Mr. Whitmore left something for you." He handed her a sealed envelope. Her name was written on it in the same neat handwriting she'd seen before. That night after the kids went to bed, she opened it carefully. Inside was a letter and a smaller envelope tucked inside. "Dear Tanya, if you're reading this, it means my time has come. Don't be sad for me. I've lived a full life, and meeting you made it even fuller. You kept your promise to help others, and I know you'll continue to do so. You are the daughter I never had, and the world is better because you're in it. In the smaller envelope, you'll find something to help you and your children. Use it to build the future you've dreamed of. You deserve every bit of happiness that comes your way. With love and gratitude, Harold." Her hands trembled as she opened the smaller envelope. Inside was a check with a number that made her gasp. It wasn't just generous, it was life-changing. Enough to pay off her debts, buy a home, and secure her children's future. She cried again, but this time the tears were mixed with gratitude. She whispered softly, "Thank you, Harold. I'll make you proud." In the following months, Tanya continued her studies and eventually graduated with honors. She became a registered nurse, working at the same hospital where she'd done her training. Every day she wore her name badge with pride, remembering how far she'd come. She also became the director of the Whitmore Robinson Foundation, expanding its programs to reach families in other cities. Her story spread even further, not as a story of luck, but as proof that kindness can change lives in ways no one expects. At home, things were finally peaceful. She bought a modest but cozy house with a garden where her children could play. Sometimes she'd sit on the porch in the evening, watching the sunset, feeling Harold's presence in the quiet air. She could almost hear his voice saying, "Keep going, Tanya, you're doing great," and she did keep going. Every day she carried his lessons with her. That real wealth isn't about money, it's about the love and compassion you leave behind. Months passed, and the world seemed quieter without Harold. Tanya often caught herself reaching for her phone to call him, only to remember he wasn't there anymore. But somehow she could still feel his presence. Every time she helped someone, every time she smiled at a stranger, it was as if he was right beside her, reminding her to keep believing in people. The foundation grew bigger than anyone could have imagined. News outlets continued to talk about how one act of kindness between a single mother and a lost old man had turned into a movement that changed lives. Donations came in from all over the country, and new programs were launched to help single parents find jobs, homes, and education. Tanya was now the director, but she never let the title go to her head. She still went to work in her nursing uniform, still smiled at patients like she always did, and still treated everyone with the same warmth and respect she had shown Harold that first rainy day. Her children were growing fast. Jordan was in high school now, tall and confident, with dreams of becoming an engineer. Kayla was a bright and caring girl, always ready to help her classmates. They were proud of their mom and even prouder of what she stood for. One Sunday afternoon, Tanya decided to take them to the community center built by the foundation. It had a small garden, a playground, and classrooms for parents who were learning new skills. The walls were covered in photos, families smiling, graduates holding diplomas, and volunteers planting trees. Kayla stopped in front of a large photo that showed Tanya and Harold standing together at the very first foundation event. Underneath, there was a plaque that read, "Kindness can build a bridge between two hearts no matter how different they are." "Mom," Kayla said softly, "he must be so proud of you." Tanya smiled. "I hope so, sweetheart. He gave me a chance, and now I get to give others the same." Later that evening, they went home and had dinner together. The table was full of laughter and stories. For the first time in a long while, Tanya felt truly content. She looked at her children and realized that all the pain, all the struggles, every sleepless night had led her to this moment. After dinner, when the kids went to bed, she sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The air was cool and the stars shone brightly above. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Thank you, Harold. You changed my life in more ways than I can say." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small worn photo of the two of them that she always kept. The corners were bent, but it was her favorite. It reminded her that miracles don't always come in grand ways. Sometimes they come disguised as a confused old man standing in the rain. The next morning, Tanya went to work at the hospital. It was a busy day, full of patients and phone calls. But she loved it. She loved listening to people's stories, holding their hands when they were scared, and reminding them that they weren't alone. During her lunch break, a young nurse sat beside her. "Ms. Robinson," she said shyly, "I just wanted to thank you. I got a scholarship from your foundation. I'm the first in my family to go to nursing school." Tanya smiled warmly. "That's wonderful. You should be proud of yourself." The young woman nodded, her eyes bright. "It's all because of you." Tanya shook her head gently. "No, it's because of you. You took the chance and did the work. Remember that." As the young nurse walked away, Tanya felt her chest swell with pride. Harold had once told her that kindness builds people. Now she understood exactly what he meant. Every person helped by the foundation was another life touched, another story rewritten. That weekend, the foundation held its annual celebration event. It had been 5 years since it was created. Hundreds of people filled the hall: parents, children, teachers, and supporters. There was music, laughter, and the smell of good food in the air. When it was Tanya's turn to speak, the crowd fell silent. She walked up to the podium holding a small note card, though she didn't really need it. She looked around the room and saw so many faces, faces filled with hope and gratitude. She began softly. 5 years ago, I was just a single mother trying to keep her head above water. I didn't have much, but I had faith. Faith that if I kept doing the right thing, somehow life would find a way to turn around. One rainy afternoon, I saw an old man who looked lost. I didn't know who he was. I just saw someone who needed help. That moment changed everything, not because of what he gave me, but because of what he taught me. He reminded me that kindness is never wasted. She paused for a moment, her eyes glistening. That man was Harold Whitmore. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. He saw something in me I didn't even see. And because of him, we're all here today. This foundation isn't just about me or him. It's about all of us. It's about the power of compassion and how one small act can ripple through lives in ways you can't imagine. The audience was quiet, many wiping tears from their eyes. Tanya smiled softly. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that you don't have to be rich to make a difference. You just have to care. That's how change begins, one heart at a time. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. People stood and clapped for her, but she knew deep down they were clapping for Harold too. After the event, Tanya stepped outside into the cool night air. The sky was filled with stars again, just like the night she'd whispered her thanks to him. She looked up and smiled. "We did it, Harold," she said quietly. "We really did." Over the next few years, the foundation expanded to other states. Tanya began working with universities and community programs to provide even more opportunities for single parents. She traveled often, giving speeches, meeting families, and sharing her story. But no matter where she went, she never forgot where she came from. Back home, life remained beautifully simple. On weekends, she still cooked big breakfast for the kids, played music while cleaning, and made time for family movie nights. She never let success take away the small joys that had always kept her grounded. One evening, after a long day, she sat in her living room with her daughter, who was now a teenager. Kayla was scrolling through old photos on her tablet when she said, "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course," Tanya said, setting down her tea. "Do you ever miss him?" "Mr. Whitmore?" Tanya looked at her for a long moment, her eyes soft. "Every day, but I don't feel sad anymore. He's still here, in what we do, in the people we help, in the smiles we see. That's how you keep someone alive, sweetheart, by carrying their goodness forward." Kayla smiled. "Then he'll never really be gone." Tanya nodded. "That's right." Years later, when Tanya was older and her children had families of their own, she often visited the park where she first met Harold. It had changed over time, new benches, new trees, but the memory remained fresh in her heart. She would sit there for a while, watching people walk by, sometimes helping a child who dropped their toy, or chatting with an elderly couple feeding the birds. One afternoon, a young mother sat beside her, holding a baby and looking tired. Tanya smiled at her kindly. "Long day?" The woman nodded. You could say that, Tanya chuckled softly. I remember those days. It gets better, I promise. The young woman smiled faintly. I hope so. They talked for a while about life, about motherhood, about trying to stay hopeful when things felt heavy. When they said goodbye, the young mother thanked her and walked away smiling. Tanya watched her go, her heart full. As she stood up to leave, a cool breeze brushed past her face. She looked up at the sky, and for a brief second she could almost see Harold's gentle smile in her mind. Still teaching me, huh? She whispered with a smile. She walked home slowly, feeling light. Her story had come full circle. From a rainy afternoon where kindness began to a lifetime of passing it forward. That night, as she sat by her window, she thought of all the lives that had been touched, all the people who had found hope again. She knew that was Harold's true gift. Not the money, not the fame, but the reminder that humanity still mattered. Before going to bed, she whispered her usual prayer. Thank you for the people who cross our paths and for the chances to make a difference. Thank you for showing me that love always finds a way. And somewhere beyond the stars, it felt like someone was whispering back, well done, Tanya, well done. The story ends not with riches or fame, but with peace. The kind that comes from knowing your kindness has outlived you, that it will continue to ripple through the world long after you're gone. Because in the end, that's what Harold taught her, that the smallest act of kindness can create the biggest change. And Tanya lived every day proving that to be true.